The eyes don't move, but somehow you know they're watching. They sit quietly on a shelf, hands folded neatly, lips curled into a frozen smile. To most, they're toys, childhood relics made of porcelain and fabric. But for many, dolls evoke something darker, a chill, a shiver, an instinct to turn away, even when the doll hasn't moved an inch. What is it about dolls that terrifies us? This fear isn't new. Long before Annabelle haunted Hollywood, before Chucky wielded a knife, dolls were stirring unease in the hearts of men and women across the world. The ancient Greeks buried their dead with them. The Egyptians crafted them in the image of gods and demons. In nearly every culture, dolls were not playthings. They were talismans, tools of magic, and sometimes vessels. The oldest known dolls date back over 4,000 years. Archaeologists unearthed small humanoid figures from Egyptian tombs, carved from wood, stone, even ivory. Some had strings of hair, others painted eyes. These were not intended for games. These were meant to guide the dead, to speak to the divine, or to guard something no longer living. In Rome, girls would dedicate their dolls to the gods when they married, surrendering childhood to the world of men. The dolls were symbols, not toys, but it wasn't until the 16th and 17th centuries in Europe that dolls began to resemble what we now think of. Creepy little figures with glassy eyes and stiff bodies. Porcelain dolls. Pale, perfect faces. Frozen in time. And yet something was off. Imagine a 19th century parlor. Candlelight flickers. A storm howls outside. And there, sitting upright in a velvet dress, is a doll with glass eyes that seem a little too lifelike, a little too aware. These dolls weren't soft or cuddly. They were delicate, cold, unblinking, made in the image of children, but often with adult features, uncanny combinations that make the brain twitch. Too close to human, but not close enough. That's the birthplace of the unease. Psychologists call it the uncanny valley, a discomfort triggered by objects that appear almost human, but not quite right. Dolls live deep in that valley. Their stillness, their perfection, their silent stares, all conspire to mimic us without truly being us. And our brains revolt. But the fear goes beyond psychology. In Victorian England, death was everywhere. Plagues, poor sanitation, and brutal winters meant children rarely saw adulthood. Mourning was an industry. Hair from the deceased was woven into jewelry. Photographs were taken of the dead, posed as if they were still alive. And dolls were sometimes made in the likeness of the departed. They weren't always toys. Sometimes they were substitutes for grief. Some families commissioned porcelain dolls with the exact face of their dead child, so that something might remain after the flesh had faded. These dolls, dressed in the clothes of the lost, placed in cribs or chairs, became something else. Not tributes, not memories, echoes. One particularly haunting case occurred in 1889, when a wealthy family in Edinburgh had a doll crafted in the likeness of their daughter Emily, who had died of diphtheria. The doll was made with real hair, Emily's hair. It was said to cry in the middle of the night. Guests reported hearing footsteps in the nursery long after the doors were locked. Of course, it's easy to dismiss it as myth, or grief, or madness. But the pattern emerges again and again across cultures and centuries. Dolls that cry, dolls that blink, dolls that fall from shelves with no one near. Tiny bodies, harboring something unseen, or perhaps something remembered. So when we glance at a doll and feel our skin crawl, maybe we're not imagining anything. Maybe we're sensing everything the porcelain refuses to say. Some say spirits prefer small spaces. That's the whisper passed down in Caribbean voodoo and Appalachian folklore, in the hushed warnings of Filipino grandmothers. The idea is simple and chilling. A human soul, or something darker, can be drawn into a vessel, not a house, not a person, but something smaller, something quiet, something like a doll. The belief in doll possession spans continents. In Haiti, it's the zombie. In Japan, it's the Okiku doll, which allegedly grows real human hair. And in Germany, tucked away in a dark corner of a museum in Thuringia, there's a doll that hasn't been touched in over a century, because every time someone tried, blood appeared on its porcelain cheek. Of course, skeptics roll their eyes. A child's toy? Cursed? Haunted? But the stories persist. Because dolls don't just look human, they mimic us. And if you believe a soul can inhabit an object, what better disguise than a lifelike figure with eyes and limbs and a place to sit? One of the most infamous examples lives in Key West, Florida. His name is Robert. Robert the doll was a gift to a boy named Eugene Otto in the early 1900s. He was handmade, stuffed with straw, and dressed in a sailor suit. But Eugene insisted the doll wasn't just a gift, it was alive. He spoke to Robert. More disturbingly, Robert spoke back. Neighbors swore they saw the doll moving from window to window when the family was away. Objects would be thrown, voices heard, laughter in empty rooms, and whenever something bad happened, broken dishes, mysterious fires, accidents, Eugene always said the same thing. Robert did it. Eventually, Robert was locked in the attic, but even then, visitors claimed they heard pacing, giggles, the scrape of little feet. Today, Robert sits in a museum. Behind glass, alone, visitors are warned, ask permission before taking a photo, disrespect him, and misfortune may follow. The walls are lined with letters from those who ignored the warning. Apologies from people who lost jobs, crashed cars, or got sick after mocking the doll. Then there's Annabelle. No, not the movie version with her exaggerated porcelain features and dead-eyed stare. The real Annabelle is far less dramatic and somehow more terrifying. She's a soft, floppy, raggedy Ann doll. And she allegedly became the vessel for something that pretended to be the spirit of a dead girl. According to paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, a nursing student received the doll as a gift. Soon after, she and her roommate reported strange events. Notes left in childlike handwriting, doors opening on their own, and the doll changing positions. Then came the scratches, the attacks, the claim that something was trying to take over. The Warrens concluded it wasn't a child's ghost at all. It was something demonic, a trickster using the form of a harmless toy to gain trust and feed on fear. Annabelle now sits in a glass case in the Warrens' Occult Museum. A sign warns, positively do not open. And again, like Robert, she has a reputation. Visitors who mocked her have met with accidents. Some never made it home. Coincidence or consequence? Psychologists call it projection. Our minds assigning emotion to inanimate objects. But how do you explain the matching stories across centuries and cultures? Dolls that move, that speak, that bring sickness and misfortune. How do you explain the fact that even as adults, we hesitate before locking eyes with something made of glass and cloth. Some believe it's all nonsense, that dolls are just creepy because they resemble us, that our minds are playing tricks in the dark. But ask yourself this: why do so many haunted objects take the shape of a doll? Maybe it's not the shape, maybe it's the size. Because to a spirit looking for shelter, small is perfect. Every doll has a creator, a pair of hands that shaped its form, painted its eyes, dressed it in lace or rags, and gave it a name. But what happens when the creator becomes the curse? In the 1800s, a doll maker in Prague, known only as Marta the Pale, was said to carve faces based on real children, not commissions, not portraits, but children she saw in her dreams. No one knew where her dolls came from, but locals whispered that after each new creation, a child in the city would fall ill or vanish entirely. The shop was eventually burned to the ground, her dolls scattered. Some say they still turn up in Eastern European antique shops, and if you find one, never ever bring it into your home. Tales like Marta's linger in the dusty corners of doll history, buried beneath decades of marketing and mass production. But something unsettling remains even in the dolls that line store shelves today, perfectly packaged, plastic limbs, painted eyes, a smile that never fades. And then there are the ones that smile too much. In 2012, a woman in Mexico City purchased a second-hand doll at a flea market. When she got home, she noticed its eyes had changed color, brushed it off, but then came the whispering. Not in her head, in the room, at night. She swore the doll was speaking a language she didn't recognize. She returned it the next morning, only to find the seller had disappeared. No one had ever seen a doll like that before, or since. Could it be suggestion, power of belief, or is there something older at play? Dolls, at their core, are mirrors, not just of appearance, but of intent. They reflect what we put into them: affection, grief, fear, even obsession. In Japan, there's an annual festival called Ningyo-Kuyo, where people bring old dolls to temples, not to discard them, but to lay them to rest. Because dolls, they believe, absorb something from us. And once they've served their purpose, they must be honored, buried, never thrown away. What happens to all the dolls we've abandoned? The ones left in attics, basements, landfills, or worse, given to someone else without their story? It's said that spirits linger in forgotten places, so maybe it's no coincidence that old dolls are often found in the darkest corners of a home, covered in dust, eyes still open, watching. And here's the final twist. While we fear dolls for what they might do to us, history suggests it was never about them. It was always about us. We made them. We gave them faces, hearts, and names. We imagined their personalities. We talked to them, played with them, mourned with them, and eventually, we feared them. Why? Because dolls don't age, they don't die, they remember. A child grows up and moves on, but the doll stays the same, silent, still, a ghost of a time when someone believed it was real. Maybe that's why they scare us. They hold on to the things we let go of: innocence, attachment, grief. They become relics of moments we've tried to bury. And sometimes they dig their way back out. So next time you see a doll at a garage sale, in an attic, behind a museum's glass, don't just look at its face. Look at what it might be carrying. Because in the world of Porcelain Nightmares, the scariest part isn't that the doll is haunted. It's that it remembers who you are. They say fear fades with the light, but when the sun goes down and the house is quiet, that's when they come back. The unblinking eyes, the porcelain skin, the echo of laughter from a mouth that doesn't move. Dolls were meant to comfort, to protect, to play. But somewhere along the way, they became something else. Thank you for walking with us through the shadows, through centuries of whispers, haunted hallways, and fragile faces that hold more than just paint and plaster. If you feel like something's watching you now, maybe don't turn around too quickly. If you enjoyed tonight's descent into darkness, like, subscribe, and explore more of the strange, the twisted, and the true. This is Behind Closed Eyes, where reality ends and fear begins.